moments. We are Time and Eternity, timeandeternity.net. We are a personal, professional, and organizational development company. We believe the greatest investment that people will ever make is in themselves, personally and professionally. We believe as you grow as a person, as you grow professionally in the way we teach the wholeness of life, you will not only add value to others, you will find tremendous value in you and also add value to others. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we did a webinar on who we are. You can find that on our website and on YouTube. So it's timeandeternity.net. I am Doug Herald, President and CEO of Time and Eternity. There's my bio along with Dr. Bobby Sparks. Bio is on our website. I'm here in my home in Northern Kentucky. Bobby is in her home in lovely Dallas, Texas. And she's the one that's done all the work behind most of this. I appreciate her help. Without what she does, there's no way we could do what we do. So this evening we're going to talk about a subject that I think is pretty common to folks. Maybe a different way to look at it. Grief and mourning. You know, life and circumstance happen to us all. There's going to come time, either there has or there will come time in your life where you deal with grief and deal with mourning, and understanding how to deal with it is a pretty big deal. So we're going to take up a pretty sober subject, but I believe it's important as we talk about life and the wholeness of life. I believe understanding grief and understanding mourning is a really, really big deal. So we're going to look at that tonight, and appreciate you joining us. Appreciate the opportunity to get to come into to your home and to your life and talk to you about this very, very big subject, very important subject that we're going to talk about tonight. Mourning. What is grief? What is mourning? It's a result in life of when you lose a major part of life. The dictionary definition of mourning is keen mental suffering and distress over affliction or loss, sharp sorrow, pain, regret, a cause or occasion of keen distress and sorrow. Grief and mourning is something that I believe all of us are going to go through. Most of us probably have, but how we deal with that inside of the picture of the wholeness of life is honestly is a big deal, and it does matter to what's going on in folks' life. So we're going to talk about that. Who grieves? Well, obviously everyone grieves. Whether you understand it or not. And I realize we live in a day and age where folks have a tough time maybe showing emotion, certainly men, but even women anymore. We think it's weakness to be able to show emotion, but the reality is grief is something, unless you're the next person to die, you're not going to get through life without it. You're not, whether you readily admit it, whether you act like nothing in life phases you or not, the reality is your heart. If you're human at all, your heart will be broken by this thing called grief and mourning. So who does it? Everyone. Everyone mourns. It's not no matter what culture, what language, what country, what region of a country, what part of the world you're from, grief is still something that's very, very common to people. And certainly to be able to understand the opportunity to see what it is and how to deal with it. I hope it will be a big deal and something special to you. Why do people grieve? There's several things here: loss of a loved one, loss of a child, miscarriage, job, divorce, debt, love, relationship, loss of a pet, loss of anything that's important in life is what you grieve about. Rather, and part of the personal development of yourself is everybody else doesn't have to do it the way you and I do it. Everybody else doesn't have to do it the same way. But for you to understand uh, the way your mind works and the way your heart works is really, really a big deal. Obviously, the loss of a loved one, that's a big deal, and to be able to, to be able to grieve for those people properly for yourself is something that's a big deal that we'll get into. Certainly, I don't know if it's the most tragic. Certainly, one of the most tragic things in life is the loss of a child, um, um, miscarriage. Miscarriage is one that's a really, in my opinion, a silent sufferer for a lot of folks. You know, Sometimes we look at miscarriage, if we're not the people directly involved with it, as something that somebody should just get over and wash under the rug. Whether it's early uh, in a pregnancy or late in the pregnancy, the joy of 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 being pregnant, the joy of the expectation of a child, the joy of those dreams, the joy of those hopes are real to a mom and to a dad, even if it's 8 weeks, you know 8 months. It doesn't matter. Miscarriage is a deal that's real, and a lot of times the folks that are not involved with it don't understand that. So hence we can't allow the folks that are involved directly with it to grieve. But it is important for you to grieve. It is a loss. It's a loss of hope. It's a loss of dreams. It's a loss of that boy or girl, the expectation of being a parent. So miscarriage is certainly one that's a real private sufferer for those folks that are directly involved with it. Um, no matter at what stage it is. So to understand that it's okay to grieve, to understand that there's hurt there and that it's real is a big deal. Certainly, the loss of a job. You say, well, that's sort of stupid. Well, you've probably never been fired if you say that, or you've never had your company shut down and go bankrupt, or your company shut down and leave your city to go to another city or another country. There's a lot of folks that have been at a job, and that job is their identity. That job is their hope. That job is their future. That job is the way they provide for their family. That job's a big deal. So, folks grieving over a job, does that happen? Absolutely, it happens, and that's a big deal. Um, divorce is something that's probably way too familiar in our society, but it still hurts. Sometimes because it's so familiar. If we're not the ones directly involved, we think it's not necessarily a big deal. But if you've ever been through a divorce, or if you've ever helped somebody you love go through a divorce, it's a really rough time. It's hell in a lot of ways. Nobody ever gets married assuming they're going to get a divorce. So so a divorce is a big deal. A lot of folks describe going through a divorce as every emotion you have going through you all at the same time. There's a lot of truth in that. Debt. Sometimes we grieve because of debt. Certainly, love and relationships. Um, you know, I had a dear friend of mine who always said that puppy love still real to a puppy. So when we have people that we know that lose the relationships and engagement, or even if it's I have three young daughters, young, not as young as they used to be, 19, 20, and 22. And as they date and do things, as those relationships break apart, there's still some time of grief there. But certainly, loss of those things. And then, lastly, and this certainly is not an all-encompassing list, but, loss of a pet. Um, I've had a couple of friends of mine in literally the last few weeks that's had to put down their animal, um, their dog, And one asked me last week, is it stupid for me to be this upset? And certainly it's not stupid. I have a great big old German Shepherd laying here on the floor that's, she's spoiled rotten. She's sort of the king of the house. She's been here for, 7, 8 years now. We have a cat named Max. He's been around for 13 or 14 years. When that cat or that dog's gone, we're going to miss it. So that's a part of what's going on. It's a part of what grief is. So these are some of the reasons why we grieve. Um, and before I go further, I want you to know that you can ask some questions. You can send those questions to Bobby by clicking the little person icon up in the corner of the join me, and then just find Bobby's name and send her a question, and she'll get that question to me. We want to be a help. We want to be a blessing. We want to actually help you with this subject and with some of your pain and some of your suffering. Grief and mourning. Should we allow ourselves and others to grieve? Um, Answer to both of those questions is yes. Um, Grief, grieving, and give permission to grieve is a big deal. Um, a couple things when tragedy hits our personal life, um, loss of someone we love, it's a big deal. It's a loss. Um, and then when tragedy certainly hits really, really close to home, it's important that you allow yourself time to grieve. Um, and when you talk about the stages of grief here in a few minutes, we'll talk about how long that takes. There's no right or wrong answer. The reality is to make sure that we allow ourselves to grieve is a big deal, and also giving others permission to grieve, giving others permission to to know that it's okay to be heartbroken and broken. A lot of times you go to a funeral and you'll see somebody there that's grieving and that's grief stricken, and somebody will tell them, well, you got to stop crying, and you got to stop, and they wouldn't want this, and they being the person that has passed away, and the reality is sometimes when other people grieve, we're uncomfortable, but to understand that allowing that person to grieve is a really big deal. Certainly, I think every family has one or two that that's the bride of every wedding and the corpse of every funeral. And no matter what's going on, they get a lot of attention. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody that lost their mom or their husband or their sibling. Allowing those folks to grieve. You say, well, I don't know what to say when I go to a funeral. You don't have to say anything. Say I'm sorry. Say I love you. Say it's okay to cry. Uh, Having the right answer is not necessarily important. Being there, giving somebody love and support and permission to grieve is important. A lot of times we tell folks not to grieve because we're afraid of how to deal with their grief and that grief. And a lot of times you'll go to a funeral, and maybe you don't necessarily know the one that has passed, but you have a relationship or two that there, and you're there for them. And the time you view the casket or the ceremony, there's sorrow there. So for you to feel that sorrow is okay. A lot of times we're not comfortable feeling that. But for us to give ourselves permission and certainly give others permission to grieve is a big deal. Certainly, there's a passage in the Bible that says, "Sorrow not as those which have no hope." Certainly, if you have hope of of the afterlife, if you have loved ones that have passed on in the spiritual world and have trusted in Jesus Christ, Paul says, "I'd have you not sorrow not as those which have no hope, which sleep in Jesus will God bring with them." But you still sorrow, you still hurt, you're still empty, you still miss them. It's still acceptable and still allowed. Sorrow, because we've lost somebody. Sorrow because we lost something that's been important to us. That's what grief is. When you grieve and allow others to grieve, it begins the process that all of us must work through. And some of you out there may have lost a loved one and have never allowed yourself to grieve because you think that's a sign of weakness. In reality, you're hindering where you're at in life because you've never come to the understanding of being able to grieve. And that's a big deal. Understanding that and understanding that you can go through it, is a big deal. People grieve because they love. And when we love, we hurt. The shortest verse in the Bible, and everybody seems to know this verse, is Jesus wept. And in that passage, when it says Jesus wept, the folks that were around him said one to another, "My, how he loved them," talking about his love for Martha, Mary, Lazarus. And when you look at that, that's why we grieve. We grieve because we love. We grieve because we care. We grieve because we're brokenhearted and we're empty over the loss of a loved one, or we're brokenhearted and we weep with others that weep. Weep with those that weep and rejoice with those that rejoice. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. You have a tough time be better in life than Christ, and yet here in the passage, Jesus wept. And the question is, why is he weeping? And they said, "My, how they love them." You grieve and you cry and you allow others to grieve and you allow others to cry because of loss, and loss of someone you love, loss of something you love. That's okay. And you have to understand that that's okay. It's okay to let your heart go and understand it and feel that way. We have here the stages of grief. Might be important for you to understand them. First is denial. Denial is always the first stage. When tragedy comes, you can't believe it. You don't want to accept it. You don't want to believe it. Um, that denial is a part of loss. That denial is a part of grief. And then after denial, there's a stage quite often that's called anger. Angry because why this happened. Angry because why did it have to be my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my husband, my wife, my child, my friend? And, and understanding that is a really big deal. But understanding that denial followed by anger is a normal progression in what's going on, and then after anger, because you're really upset, you're really pissed off about where you're at, about having to be empty. We need to understand that it's okay to let those feelings go. Let them go as far as let them out. Get upset, get mad. Understand that anger is a natural progression of the stages of grief, and then after anger comes depression. You got to understand that that's normal. Excuse me, that's my dog. Told you she was here. You got to understand that's normal. It's a big deal. A couple things here. When somebody you love's going through it, it's natural for them to be depressed. It's natural for them to pull away and go to an isolated place. Oftentimes we have to understand that that's not, that's a part of what's going on. Have to understand that's a part of the grieving process, denial, anger, and then depression. But to work through those things are important. And then certainly, even bargaining at, you know, you personally, somebody you love has cancer, somebody you love is has an illness that looks like certain death. To begin to try to bargain that, I'll be better, or I'll do better, I'll do anything. Those are natural. Um, it's a natural part of grieving. It's a natural part of what we do, and then finally acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean you won't ever think about them. Um, you know, 4 years ago, this past December, my grandmother passed away, and my grandmother loved me unconditionally. No matter what I did, my grandmother thought I hung the moon. And no matter where I was at in life or what I was going through in life, I could pick up the phone and call my grandmother, and just in a few minutes, it'd be okay. Um, told her what was going on. Most of the time, I never told her what I was down about or struggling about, but just being able to talk to her made a big difference in my life. Being able to talk to her made me feel better, and then I lost her, and we buried her Christmas Eve 4 years ago. There's still times when I miss my grandma. Doesn't mean I haven't accepted it. It means that a big part of my life, a part of my life for 43 years, was then gone. Told somebody the other day, I just miss my grandma. My grandfather's been gone for my 27, 28 years. It's a normal part of what's going on. Just because you miss them, or just because you accept it, doesn't mean that it doesn't go away. Obviously, time does heal the wound, but it's still there. There's still the memories. There's still the joy, the happiness, the time of season, the time of year, the certain thing that reminds you of somebody that you love that's passed away. That's a normal part of life. But just because we can come to terms with our grief and the terms with them gone, doesn't mean we don't love them, and doesn't mean that there's a stake in the ground that, hey, after 12 months I'm done, I'm not grieving no more. Sometimes after years and years and years, you still sorrow, you still miss them, you still grieve. My grandfather passed away 22 or 3 or 4 years. I guess 23 years before my grandmother passed away, and many a times I would come to the kitchen and I'd see my grandma with tears running down her cheeks, and say, "Grandma, what's the matter?" And she'd say, "I just miss him. I just miss him." 20 years, man. 20 years after he's gone, she just missed him. My grandma had a great life. My grandma had a joyous life, but guess what? She just missed him. That's normal. That's part of it. So these are some of the stages of grief that you go through and that others will go through. Uh, you know, Grief is for us. It's not for the person that's gone. Um, my grandma, when she left this earth, she was done. She was done suffering. Um, she was at peace. I missed her. My family missed her. I grieved. Um, I grieved because there's a big spot in my heart that was left empty. But to understand that being able to work through grief is a natural process. We need to understand that it's important. We need to be able to give ourselves permission to grieve. We need to be able to give others permission to grieve. We need to be able to say, it's okay. We'll get through it. For those of you that's been through it, you don't know what a comfort it is to somebody else that's going through it. Sometimes it's too raw for you to be a comfort, but sometimes you've been through it and you do know how to be a comfort. I remember my aunt lost her husband, who was very close to us and me at a young age, and at a time when the husband probably shouldn't die. I don't know that there's a time when you should, but certainly at a young age, um, in his 30s. And I remember another lady from around the road out in Grand Slick where we lived had lost her husband at a young age. And out of all the people that came to try to comfort my aunt, the only lady that could really comfort her was the lady that had been through it. And it was a comfort. We serve a God of all comfort that may be able to comfort us in any trouble, that we may be able to comfort those that are in trouble. Sometimes you've been through it. Sometimes you've lost a mother or a father, and when somebody you know and love loses a mother or father, you can be a comfort. That's okay. Not only is that okay, that's needful. There's certain things. I mean, all the funerals I've been through, all the things that I've done, there's certain connections that I've never been able to make. I've never lost a child. I have three wonderful, healthy, beautiful girls. Um, I can certainly empathize with those that have lost children. I have dear friends that have lost children, but I can't get on the same level because I've never been there. But to be able to encourage others to work through their grief, to encourage others to know, what's going on, and that what's going on is normal and not weakness, is a big deal. Normal and not weakness. Grief is normal. It's not weakness. Sometimes we think that whether a husband or a wife or a brother or a friend, that we have to not show grief because it's weakness. If you can get to the place where you realize that grief and vulnerability is not weakness, it's a really big deal. You grieving is normal. You grieving and working through your heartache and your stuff is very, very normal, and that's a part of what we have to understand. And as we we talk about personal and professional development, we talk about the wholeness of life. Death is a part of life. Grief is a part of life. So why would you cover a subject like grief? Because there's a lot of brokenhearted people tonight, and some been brokenhearted for a long, long time, that's never allowed themselves to grieve. That's never give themselves permission to be able to grieve, and to be able to say, I miss them and I love them, and part of me's empty because they're gone. That is a big deal. That's really a big deal, and this subject's been on my heart now for a month, and we got through the last webinar. I told Bobby, I said, I want to do a subject on grief. I want a webinar where folks can just understand that it's normal and that it's okay. Uh, I know it's not comfortable to talk about grief. It's not comfortable to think about, and we shouldn't live in the dread of pain that's coming. Like I said earlier, unless you're the next one that passes from this life to the next, we're going to grieve. But there is hope. There's hope in leaning on each other, bear you one another's burdens. There's hope of being able to let your heart down around somebody else and allow them to grieve, give them permission to grieve, whether it's somebody that's your friend. It's hope to be able to give yourself time to grieve. Um, and as you go through grieving, it sort of comes in waves. Certainly the shock of it all. Um, your body sort of shuts down. Everybody's always said, "Well, I just feel numb." Of course, you feel numb. Um, One fellow says you feel numb because all the blood in your body goes into your heart to heal a broken heart. Um, I'm not real sure that's not exactly right. Somebody gets tragic news, all of a sudden they're cold and they're shivering and they're freezing. You say, well, how come? It's because the blood in your body has went inside to heal your broken heart. Just like when you fall in love, you sort of glow. It's because all the blood's rushing to the outside so you can be close to the person you love. That's a big deal. To understand that that it is tragic, to understand that you do go numb, to understand that you are broken, is a big deal, and it's okay. And then sometimes you literally get through minute by minute. So I don't know how I'm ever going to get through it. Sometimes it seems like it's really, really overwhelming, and sometimes it's minute by minute, and then it's 10-minute blocks, and then it's an hour, and then over the course of time it's a day, and then it's a week, and it's 2 weeks, and as you get better, it doesn't mean that you love less. It means that you're getting better. It means that you're grieving, and you're understanding that. But there's no time limit on it. There's times where you're overwhelmed, and you can't do anything except try to survive for the next minute. One thing you're going to understand is you grieve, that a lot of people don't feel your grief. One of the hardest things about losing a loved one of the hardest things about losing somebody that's close is the rapidness of how life keeps going by. And you're at a funeral home, and you look out the window, and you see all the cars driving by, and you see all the people going by, and you drive down the road, and you see all the people living their life, and you just want to scream, don't nobody see how bad I'm hurting? And the reality is they don't. Not because they don't care, not because they don't get it. It's because their life hasn't been affected the way your life has. Life does go on, and sometimes you just want to scream for it to stop. It's not going to stop. Yours might need to, just for a little while, for you to heal, for you to recuperate, for you to be able to walk through it. But life is not going to stop, and it's okay to be broken. It's okay to be heartbroken, and not not feel as bad as other folks, are not understanding why other folks don't feel the way you feel. Um, it's a real deal. Brokenheartedness and brokenhearted syndrome. Bobby just sent me a little note here that says, heart brokenhearted syndrome, intense emotional strain cause rapid and severe muscle weakness. Um, that's why all the blood rushes to your heart to heal it. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to walk through what's going on. We we need to understand this. Hopefully, we won't have to use it for a while. I think Monday, going to the funeral of a dear lady that lost her mom. Guess what? My mom's healthy, and my mom's a great mom, and she's still here. But I'm gonna go, and the lady's brokenhearted because her mom's gone. So what are you gonna do? I'm just gonna love her. I'm just gonna love her, and I'm gonna help her. My dog likes to bark every time somebody blows their horn. So, but you get that brokenheartedness, and you don't have to feel guilty about it. You don't have to. You don't have to worry that you won't get through it. You don't have to worry that you can't help somebody else through it, because just being there is a comfort. So that's grief. Uh, I realize it probably doesn't touch the reality of what you may be feeling if you're personally going through it, or when you personally go through it. But hopefully this will be a little bit of help to you. We have time. If somebody wants to send Bobby a question, I'd be happy to answer it. I am Doug Herald, pastor and president and CEO of Time and Eternity. Um, for more information about our membership or personal coaching, you can go to timeandeternity.net. You can email us, me, Bobby, at info@timeandeternity.net. We truly want to be a help. We truly want to be We truly want to be an encouragement. We want to equip you with some things in life that'll allow you to be whole and that'll allow you to go. I got a question from someone, and it says, "Can you talk about how when people consider grief as weakness, ends up hindering the process?" Um, yeah, when people consider grief as weakness, they won't allow themselves to grieve openly. And when you don't allow yourself to grieve, it's still pent up. You know, a lot of times depression is anger turned inward. Uh, it's okay to be angry when a loved one dies. It's okay to be hurt when a loved one dies. And if you don't allow yourself to grieve, you don't allow yourself to let that out, you're in real trouble. It's like a pressure cooker. You know, if the pressure builds up too much, if the steam spout don't let off, it will eventually give somewhere. If you are not willing to get past the view of it being weakness, the pressure will come out somewhere else. It'll come out in anger. It'll come out in affecting your marriage, your relationships, your job, your friendships. Uh, the pressure will come out, whether it comes out through what's naturally looks like grief or whether it looks like something else, but the root cause is still the grief, and that's a really big deal. Another question: how do you express anger without hurting others? What are healthy ways to do that? That's a really good question. Um, expressing anger without hurting others is having a safe place to where you can talk about how you feel. Having a dear friend or two where you can scream and let the pressure off. You can tell them how you feel. You can tell them that you're angry with God. You're angry with the situation. You're angry with the person that took their life. You're angry with the person that took the person's life that you love. Um, you have to be careful. And it sort of links to the first question. If you don't understand how to grieve and understand that you are hurting, you will hurt others. Hurting people hurt people. But to be able to let your anger out in a positive way, you know, by talking about it, by yelling about it, yelling about it, not at someone. Um, what's the healthy way to do that? Find somebody you can be honest with and be honest with them. Um, I believe wholeheartedly that in lots of situations, certainly tragic, unexpected deaths, deaths of a child, deaths of a brother or sister in an early age, death of a mother or parent in an early age, death of a spouse. There is certainly extreme situations, and not that death's not extreme, but you know, my grandmother passed away at 83, 84 years old. She had a great life. I miss her, but but in extreme circumstances, or if you don't know how to deal with it, finding counsel. If you can't find it in a friend, find it in a professional counselor, a psychiatrist, a religious counselor. Being able to talk about it with your spouse, your best friend. Um, you know, a friend loveth at all times. A friend's going to love you when you're hurt, and a friend's going to understand you when you're not perfect. Anybody can be a friend when things are going good, but most of us have one or two or three really good friends that we can just be ourselves to, and they're going to get it. They're going to understand it. And although they might not have the answers, at least getting it off, getting it out is going to help. And then certainly in um, unexpected, tragic deaths, seeking counseling is a big deal. Um, when children lose their parents at a really young age, kids that are 4, 5, 6, teenagers, maybe in the tragic death of suicide, being able to work through that. Um, can you grieve for somebody that's committed suicide? Certainly, you do. Um, it's 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 a real deal. Um, we live in an age where we don't want to talk about it, but it's real. And if we talk more about it, maybe it happened less. But to be able to deal with those circumstances is a really really big deal, and to be able to talk about those things is a big deal. But to be able to work through it and express it without hurting others, I think you have to be conscious of the fact you're hurting. A lot of times we hurt others because we're unwilling to admit that we're hurting, and we hurt them in hoping they'll help us. But it's a whole lot easier to help us if we just say, "Hey, I'm hurting." Folks understand hurt. It applies to almost all of us. We talked about a couple weeks ago that pain's a part of life. We have to live with pain. We don't have to live with suffering. Pain turns into suffering when we don't understand how to grieve and how to let things go. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, if there's any more questions, Bobby, we can sure take them. But again, timeandeternity.net. We sincerely want to be a help to you, to anybody that you know. We want to help you so you can help others that you know. The greatest investment you'll ever make is in you, and certainly that investment is inside of you. And go back and look at the first webinar we did where we talk about the apple tree. Once you're whole, those around you then can begin to be healed off of your wholeness. And that's a really, really big deal. Again, I'm Doug Herald, President, CEO of Time and Eternity. You've been listening to our webinar on grief. I appreciate you listening. This will be up even on our website. Bobby will get it up, and appreciate you listening. I appreciate all of you taking your time to listen. And there's no more questions, so we'll sign off. May God bless you. Again, I'm Doug Herald for Dr. Bobby Sparks and Time and Eternity, timeandeternity.net. Bless you. Have a great night.